only mode.
Welcome, PI analysts. This is Cindy Lynch, and we have Steve Waterhouse with us, and we have a very exciting snapshot webinar for you this month. I think you'll be really excited about it. We're PI Stumpers, so we're going to be looking at some PI patterns with Steve, who's definitely an expert at reading these. Whenever I get stumped, he's definitely the first person I'm going to call. So we're going to look at some that we have gathered through other of our clients, other analysts that you have sent to us in the past saying, help me with this. And we've picked some arbitrarily ones out to discuss as well. So your hosts for today are myself, Cindy Lynch, with Predictive Results in Atlanta. And joining me is Steve Waterhouse, our president of Predictive Results located in Florida.
Hi, Cindy.
Okay, the next slide, we're talking about even the most proficient PI practitioners are going to be stumped from now and again by some patterns. We're just baffled. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to take a look at some of them, and Steve's going to give us some feedback and commentary. If you have any questions, type them in the chat box and we'll get into them after our presentation. If you have a PI stumper that you didn't see represented in this deck, send it to us or send it to your consultant or to Steve, and we'll look at it with you. Also, let us know your feedback if this was a session that you particularly liked, and because we're considering having this a regular feature. Okay, let's take a look at, Steve, do you have a few words to say before we kind of jump into the
No, I'm excited about doing this because as you know, we get asked a lot of questions by our clients as to how to read particular patterns. And, you know, when you go through the 2-day training program and you learn how to read PI, the only thing you're missing is experience. And hopefully in sessions like this, we can share some of that with you.
Great. So here's the first one I'm throwing at you, and Steve has not been prepped on these, so he's just kind of seen this for the first time. But we see this once in a while where a pattern in the cell it's all stacked up. It looks like a straight line. How do we read that? What are we seeing?
Well, that's a fascinating one, Cindy, and it is. We don't often see this, but we occasionally see this where the pattern is very, very narrow. As a matter of fact, I've actually seen them when they were all stacked up one on top of the other, and it's an unusual pattern. It falls in, you know, probably less than 1% of the population. It's a pretty small group that we see. But the first thing that analysts should do is to not be afraid of reading the pattern. And this is true with all patterns. You don't want to be afraid to read it, even though it looks a little funny. So we would look at this and we would say, okay, what do you have? Well, you have an A over B. You know, we know we have a more social person. We have a C over A. So we know we have a more reactive person. We have a C over D, so someone a little bit more casual with the rules. We have a B over C, so someone who, or B over D, I mean, so someone who tends to be less formal in the way they operate. We also know that we've got a higher B and C, so someone that's a little bit more outgoing and a little bit more patient. So I keep using the word a little bit, and that's really what you've got. You've got someone who's not going to express their behavioral characteristics very strongly, nor are they going to be very consistent in them. The wider the pattern, the further each of these factors is from the midpoint, the more consistent that pattern is going to be, that behavior is going to be. So this is somebody who, you know, one day they're going to be one way and the next day they could be someplace completely different. And what I often say about people that look like this one is, this is a tough person to read. I don't want to play poker against this person because they don't show their tell. They don't show their emotions strongly. And so from that standpoint, it makes them a little difficult to decode. And people who have had this pattern when we've talked to them in the past. They have agreed that sometimes people don't read them right. Sometimes when they're serious, people don't know they're serious, or when they're happy, people don't know they're happy, and it's because that narrow pattern says they don't express it well. Now,
So would
go
you
ahead.
say that it's easy, especially so let's think of an interview situation. If this person is sitting with you in an interview, wouldn't it be easy to kind of see what you wanted to see?
Well, that can be true, and that's a great question. Sometimes in the interview, you're predisposed to either like or not like the person for a variety of reasons. And you have to be careful that when the person's behavior is not strongly expressed, that you're not seeing what you want to see. And so try to be as analytical as you can in that interview, and also have multiple people interview this person, especially this kind of person, because you want to see how they read them also. Different people will read this pattern differently, again, because it's so narrow. So that can be a concern. The other concern in hiring this pattern is if you need someone in a leadership role where people have to understand this person, read them, get their motivations. This person's going to have more of a struggle in that area because they aren't going to express themselves strongly. This pattern works better in jobs where less interpersonal is probably required, or where that interpersonal is not critical to the job. Certainly not strong leadership in this particular pattern. So, the fact that it doesn't have the width doesn't mean it's a bad pattern. It just means it isn't necessarily going to be one of those patterns that you're going to look at and go, wow, I really get that person.
So Steve, how much of let's say hypothetically the synthesis matches our job pro. Because one thing that I'm concerned about is our practitioners maybe seeing this pattern and immediately shying away from the individual, just because it seems a little complicated and scary. And as you said, we want to think about the role that we're putting them in. But in this case, let's say that our self-concept matches our pro.
Sure. Let's say that the self-concept, the way the person's adapting, actually looks fairly much like what you're looking for. Now you have to ask yourself, obviously this person can adapt to look more like what you want. The question is, does this person find it stressful to do so? If they do, then the probability that they can sustain it is lower. So again, we would look here at the M and draw a line straight up and see if it hits the pattern. In this particular case, it's outside the pattern. Well, notice that narrow patterns have less bandwidth in change. So this is a person who is making some changes, and it's taken them a fair amount of energy to adapt to this. And for that reason, I would say that if you need this person to look like the self-concept or look like the synthesis, given the fact that it's a negative shift, even though it's a moderate one with a narrow pattern, I would say you want to really ask some questions around what is stressing this person out and make sure that the kinds of things that are causing them stress in their current job aren't going to cause them stress working with you. That would be a real key factor for me, is to figure out. One of my favorite questions is, if your current employer could make it the job the perfect place for you, how would it be different from where it is today? And carefully listen to the answer. And if there are things in that answer that you say, oops, that would be a problem here too, then you probably don't want to inject this person into that career.
Okay. And one last question on this one, because I think it's such a good one. What about the subjectivity with this pattern?
Well, this person is fairly subjective. And you've got a subjective with a high B, so you're going to find that this person tends to be a less logical decision maker, a more emotional decision maker. And in this particular case, because the pattern is so narrow, that might show up as a very dominant feature for them. So you'd really want to take that into account and ask yourself, am I looking for someone where highly logical decisions are an important part of this job? Or am I looking for someone who's more creative, more in tune with their feelings, more subjective? And clearly, if you're looking for someone more subjective, this person's going to be just fine. Otherwise, again, you might want to dig deeper before you inject this person into that career.
Excellent. Okay, let's take a look at the next one we have.
Let's see. Let me pull the next one up here. There we go.
Oh, these are, I call these my Dr. Jekylls or Mr. Hyde people. And maybe I'm over exaggerating, but when I look at these, I'm looking at, well, I may not know who's showing up each day to the office.
Well, that's exactly true. I mean, notice that in this particular case, you've got almost a complete reversal. This is a high A, low C kind of pattern, and it's completely flipped. I mean, look at the risk profile on this versus the risk profile on this. Look at the reactive curve on this versus the proactive curve on this. I mean, it's a major difference in what's happening here. And that does mean you are going to see a Jekyll and Hyde. We all know that the person who shows up under stress is going to be the self. And the self-concept is the controlled piece. It's the piece the person's doing intentionally. Or when they run out of energy, or when they find themselves backed against a wall, then the self piece is going to come out. So if you look at the synthesis, I mean, look what's happening here. You're actually coming out with a blend of the two. You're coming out with kind of an altruistic service pattern out of this, and that's a significant difference from what we have as the self. So in this particular case, you've got someone going from a relatively stable control pattern, or not a control pattern, but a relatively stable pattern, a stabilizer pattern, to more of a change-oriented pattern. And that's a huge difference. So I would really want to find out in this particular case how this person felt about these changes. We don't find it terribly stressful for them. Notice how well within the pattern the M factor shift is. I do notice that we've only got a 39M here, which means this person doesn't have a lot of energy with which to make these changes. And that, again, might indicate that at long days or later in the week, we might stop seeing the self-concept or the synthesis person and start seeing the self. In other words, they might not be able to sustain that ability to drive that high A up.
So Steve, let's say this person's in your organization and you're going through and doing PIs and having to give feedback on your employees.
Sure.
Might this be a challenge for, and as you said, a new practitioner?
Well, here's how I would read that. I would read that kind of matter of fact. I would say, as for your natural self, you tend to be a person who is tends to do what others dictate, tends to follow the rules, tends to be responsive to the world. And however, you feel the need to take charge, to push the speed up, to get things done faster, to be more flexible, to take more risk. So when you say it that way, it doesn't come across negative in any way. Right. And it just is. And I think that's one of the important things we have to remember about PI is that there is no real positive or negative until we juxtapose it to a position. It just is. And so this is just what's happening with this person. They're going to agree with you. I mean, PI is, as we all know, amazingly accurate. And so when you read this back to this person, the person's going to tell you a story. They're going to tell you a story about why they're doing what they're doing here. And you have to listen as an interviewer or as a manager. You need to listen to that story, and it will inform the decisions you make in the future. Do I hire this person? Do I keep this person in the same path they're on? Do I find a path that fits them better? A lot of it will have to do with the story. Are they happy making these shifts? Can they make these shifts consistently, long term? Do they want to? Those are all important things to know as you get to know this person better.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. And let's look at the next one. These are often very challenging people to do a read back. It's a wide analytical pattern. So help us a little bit on how you would read this pattern back to someone, and then some coaching strategies.
Sure. This is a pattern that we actually see a lot of demand for in the technical world, primarily because this huge decision-making, problem-solving piece here with the A over B with the low B, that's a technical problem solver. And then you combine that with this strong D over C, is basically saying this is a person who solves problems really well and then provides solutions in the end. I mean, really fixes it and then bolts it down, makes it happen. They're not a big risk taker, and they tend to work by themselves. So if I was reading this back to someone, I would say you are a person who solves problems incredibly well, but you tend to do them by yourself. You tend to like to work by yourself. You have a real intensity about you and a real drive to get things done well. You're a moderate risk taker, but that doesn't mean that you won't launch into trying to solve some new problems and figure things out, because you will. One of the strengths of this person is how well they make those decisions and how quickly they drive new ideas. One of the weaknesses is how well they communicate those ideas to others. That low B combined with that high D, when you drive it off this confident high A, says this person just tells you what they think the truth is, and they're probably right, and they tell you very directly, and if you're not happy about it, they really don't care. So,
yeah, I always say this pattern can be a bit intimidating.
You bet. This can be a very intimidating pattern, but if you're in a technical world, you like this pattern because they're great to have around. They solve your problems. They make things happen. Now, in this particular case, if we look down here at the self-concept, we got a factor missing. Where did that A go? It went way down here. Hold on a minute. This person went from being a big technical problem solver to being a very moderate problem solver. That tells me that something in the environment is putting them in check. In other words, somebody's criticizing their results. Somebody's criticizing them to the point where they've actually given up. They've actually stopped making those kinds of decisions. You know, you're not getting your money's worth out of this person if this is what's happening in the self-concept. It may not show up as a huge swing in the synthesis, but I can tell you from that self-concept that there is really something going on there that is not good for this person. It's a fairly negative shift in the M, so this person isn't happy about that change. But definitely, whoever their manager is has probably been critical. I was just talking to somebody the other day who had a pattern very similar to this, and they were coaching that person, and they said to them, we would really like you to be nicer to the other people you work with, if you could. But if you can't be nicer, just keep being right. In other words, in other words, they didn't want to stifle this A, in order to make this person turn into a really nice person, because the power of this person is right here. Some coaching sometimes can bring this B up. In other words, give them more sensitivity to other people. And that can work well. I have a guy I know well who has this pattern and just is really no fun to be around. He just never smiles.
Do you find that they tend to argue and push back a bit?
Oh yeah, because they know they're right. And I often say to people with this pattern thinks almost everyone they know is an idiot. And the problem is they're probably right. In other words, they're so good at solving these problems, and they're so good at doing the research to get it done right, that they probably are as good as they say they are. And that can be pretty intimidating.
One more quick thing on this one. I often caution people when placing people in these jobs not to put them in situations where they have to make decisions quickly.
Yeah, this is a person who,
okay.
yeah, this is a person, especially because that low B, they really like to go think about it. And then with that high D, they really want to make sure it's right before they do anything. This is not a person who likes to brainstorm in a group. That's not a good place for them. But you're right. Give them, before inviting them to a meeting or asking them something important, send them an email and ask them to review it and analyze it and give you their best response. They love having the opportunity and taking the time to do that.
Excellent. Steve, these are so good. Our time is just flying by.
You picked some good ones. Let's look at the next one here.
Okay, this is one where the applicant actually checked every word.
Yeah, we have to be careful about that. It does happen where the applicants choose every single word, and it's rare, but thanks for showing this because it's important for people to know what that looks like. That's 172M, and that means they just checked them all. Checking them all is from our perspective, is like checking none of them. It essentially was a refuse to take. In other words, somebody refused to play along with the PI. And you're going to have to ask them why and see if you can get them to retake it. But that's what's happening in that circumstance.
Okay. I've only seen one in the 6 years I've been doing this. Oh, this one gets me every time. We see so many of these high B, low Ds, extreme subjectivity.
Yeah, these people connect with people in an almost intuitive way. They're so subjective and so extroverted that they are all about connecting with people. The problem is they're not about logical process and getting things done. And so we tend to try to avoid putting these people in task-oriented positions and try to put them in positions that are relationship-oriented. They do really well there. They do well in customer service because, again, they live for taking care of other people, with that big B over A, but with that that low subjectivity down there, it basically says, I get you, I feel your pain, let me see what I can do to help you. So you get a real warm connection. The problem is you have to be careful and make sure you get the follow through in the detail, because you got a low D subjective, which means there's not a whole lot of detail coming behind it.
Yeah, and that was going to be my next question. We see a lot of these type patterns applying for sales jobs that are looking for an authoritative or a persuasive.
Yeah, and a lot of these get hired into sales jobs and fall flat on their face. And the reason they get hired into sales jobs is people know them as high Bs, and everybody thinks that that's what it takes to be a salesperson, is a high B. And the truth is, a high B is very nice to have, but it doesn't make you a salesperson. What makes you a salesperson is high A's. The ability to take risk, the ability to make a cold call and take the rejection that comes with it, and the confidence to go out and make things happen. That requires a high A. So when we see a pattern like this, it often shows up in sales positions but failing. However, there is one sales position in which this is a really good match, and that is retail sales. We see this pattern show up in retail sales a lot because it doesn't require the high A. The client is coming to them. It just requires a very quick connection with people and how can I help you? And you walk into a store, everybody says, how can I help you? Well, that is the watch phrase for this pattern. How can I help you? And works out very well in those kinds of roles, customer service roles and retail style reactive sales.
Another thing with this pattern that I often say, two things. One, they never say no, so they overcommit and have a hard time delivering. And two, with that high B and extreme subjectivity, they can be what I term kind of like a situational liar. They're not lying to be malicious
Yeah, they will tell you what you want to hear, and we've actually had that problem with people, and I call it situational honesty. You know, if you were wearing an outfit that made you look awful, and you asked this person how you look, they'd say you look just fine.
Right. Yeah.
That's what we call situational honesty.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think you would have an issue with this person around that, but you'd have to understand they're not lying to you. They're trying to make you feel good. And that's what that high B juxtaposed to that subjectivity often does.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, we're down to 5 minutes, which I hate. This has been the best webinar. Can you jump to a PI on what the new system's going to look like, and share that with us?
Sure, and we'll come back and do some more of these another month, sometime in the future. But this is what the PI is going to look like in the new system. And thanks for including this one, because this is exciting to see the whole new look of PI. Notice that when our clients are in the new system now, everything's lined up. So you won't see the shifting that we saw before. What you'll need to do is compare the M factors. So if you're looking for stress, you'll see it between those M factors. But here's one of the really nice things. If you've forgotten exactly what A means or B means, in the new system, if you mouse over these and click on them, you'll get a little box that'll pop up that will remind you what each of these things means. It's a great upgrade. And if you haven't been upgraded to the new system, please reach out to your consultant. Ask them when you're due for your upgrade, so we can make sure we schedule a short training program, usually with a webinar, to train your people to use the new system, because it has some great features in it that we're just really, really excited about. Cindy, I think we're about there.
I know. I don't want it to end.
We're running out of time today, but I think we want to make sure we wish everybody a happy holidays as we wrap up the year here, and let them know that you and the rest of the associates have got a jam-packed schedule of new webinars coming up for next year. We just went over the review this week. I was thrilled to see some of the topics you guys came up with. And so right after the first of the year, you'll see emails from us with all the new topics for the new year. And I think you're going to find these are really valuable for you. And I hope that you'll encourage other members of your team to jump on these webinars and learn a little bit more about PI. As Cindy said earlier, if you have a particular topic that you'd like us to go over, just let us know. And if you have a particular topic that your team needs, just in specific for your group, any of our associates are happy to jump on a webinar or come over and go over anything on PI with you. We love doing it. I think you know that our consultants are passionate about PI. You'll also see some new products from us in the new year. So get ready to listen for some new product offerings starting January 1st. So we're pretty excited about the new year.
Sorry, before we hang up, and if anybody needs to hang up now, we understand, but we did have a question of how best to coach an individualist pattern.
Well, the individualist pattern is an interesting one, and it depends. Again, it depends on what you're trying to do. The individualist pattern is one that often doesn't fit into a group, because it wants to do it its own way. And so I think that, like all patterns, look at the gaps between the pattern and the pro for the job, and then address the person based on those gaps. In other words, in order to be successful in this particular job, you need to be a little bit more detail-oriented, or a little bit faster paced, or a little bit less assertive. Whatever are the issues that you're having with that particular person, all coaching is relative to the actions that the person needs to change in order to be more effective in that role. And so I wouldn't change what I was doing for an individualist any different than I would any other. I would start with what are the fits and gaps? What are the changes we need to see? And then is this person willing to have the conversation around what they can do to change? That's the real key to improving and coaching in PI.
Fantastic. Well, again, everyone, we invite you to reach out to your consultants for help. You've already paid for us, and as Steve said, this is what we love to do. We wish you all a wonderful Christmas and look forward to seeing you in January.
Thanks, Cindy. Thanks for putting this together.
Thank you for attending. Bye-bye.